July 14th, 1992. I remember the date because it was the night the world went black, literally. I was working the graveyard shift as a security guard at a closed factory in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. The entire factory was shut down for vacation, meaning it was completely empty. My job was simple: to sit in my car in the parking lot and ensure no one entered the building. I wasn't allowed inside, which meant my car was my only post, my only shelter. The air had been heavy all evening, but no one expected what hit us. To pass the time, I had the radio on low, tuned to the Major League Baseball All-Star game from Jack Murphy Stadium. The comforting thwack of bat on ball, the roar of the crowd, the announcer's smooth voice. It was a small piece of normalcy in the quiet, isolated factory. A thunderstorm rolled in with a sudden, violent fury. One moment, the rhythmic hum of the factory's distant generators was my only company. The next, the world outside exploded. Rain lashed against the windows and the wind howled like a banshee. Suddenly, the baseball game was interrupted by the jarring, urgent tone of the emergency alert system. A robotic voice cut through the static. Tornado warning. Seek shelter immediately. A jolt of terror went through me. Then with a definitive thunk, the power went out. Inside the sprawling, silent factory, the emergency lights kicked on, casting an unsettling, glowing red like embers in a dying furnace, barely visible through the sheets of rain and the momentary flashes of lightning. It was like looking into the eyes of some dormant beast. Outside, though, the darkness was absolute. The parking lot lights, usually a beacon, were dead, swallowed by the storm. I peered into the pitch-black abyss, unable to see more than a few feet in front of me. That's when it hit. A terrifying, splintering crash that sent a tremor through the pavement and up into my seat. The sound, impossibly loud, seemed to hang in the air, its echo stretching into an agonizing eternity, even as the storm raged. It was close, too close. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had to know what happened. I had to get out. Fumbling for the ignition, I started my Ford Escort, its engine coughing to life, a small, fragile island of noise in the howling chaos. I edged the car forward, my headlights cutting twin beams into the pitch-black void of the curvy driveway. The rain was a solid wall, making every foot of progress feel like driving blind. Then the beam caught it, filling the entire exit. Sprawling like a monstrous broken limb was a giant oak tree, its colossal trunk having ripped from the earth. It had smashed the company sign to splinters, completely blocking the only way out. I was trapped, alone. In the dark, with the echoes of a tornado warning still ringing in my ears, and I had no idea what was out there, the eye of the storm. With no cell phone in 1992, contacting anyone was impossible. I was truly on my own. Trapped and isolated, I huddled in my Ford Escort, the only refuge against the unseen fury outside. Then amidst the pandemonium, a sudden, unnerving silence began to creep in. The roaring wind faded to a whisper, the deluge softened to a drizzle. A strange, deceptive calm settled over the factory, like the world was holding its breath. Against my better judgment, a desperate need to understand the chaos, to see the extent of the damage, pulled me from the relative safety of my car. I opened the door and stepped out into the strange, humid stillness. I couldn't see much in the lingering darkness, just the vague outlines of debris and the looming factory. But the respite was brutally short-lived. Before I could fully survey the destruction, the storm resumed with a vengeance. It didn't roll back in. It exploded around me. The wind shrieked, instantly tearing at my clothes. Rain turned from drops to a solid, icy sheet, blinding me. I had to run, stumbling through the renewed deluge, scrambling back to the flimsy shelter of my car. By the time I slammed the door shut, I was soaking wet, shivering not just from the cold, but from the gut-wrenching terror of being caught in that sudden, overwhelming assault. The wind was a physical force, shaking my Ford Escort violently. It felt like a giant hand was pushing against the roof, threatening to roll the car over. Then, adding to the nightmare, a tree branch was blown directly under my car. It lodged there, scraping and scratching against the undercarriage with an eerie, rhythmic sound that grated on my nerves. The rain intensified, a relentless downpour that turned the windshield into a blurred, opaque wall. I couldn't see anything. I was just a small, vulnerable target in the heart of the storm. Suddenly, the baseball game on the radio was interrupted again by the familiar, chilling tone of the emergency alert system. Another tornado warning. It felt like lightning was striking all around my car, not with a crash, but with a series of sharp, terrifying clicks. One particularly close strike illuminated the darkness for a split second, and I saw a spark shoot up into the air nearby, only to fizzle out just as quickly. For the next 10 minutes, I sat there, frozen behind the wheel, unable to move, unable to think of anything but the terrifying power unleashed outside. Dawn and relief. Then, just as abruptly as it had arrived, the storm completely stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ringing in my ears. I cautiously got out of my car, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and crushed leaves. I reached down and pulled the offending tree branch from beneath my Escort. Leaning against the still shaking car, I listened, and in the distance I heard the faint, comforting wail of sirens. Within 30 minutes, a Cuyahoga Falls police officer spotted me from the road, his spotlight cutting through the lingering gloom. The sight of another human being, even just a silhouette in the beam of a flashlight, brought an overwhelming wave of relief. The factory owner arrived around 2 a.m., and by 8 a.m., the colossal tree that had trapped me was finally removed. I later learned that a tornado had indeed touched down in Cuyahoga Falls that night, just over a mile from where I was. Thinking about how close I came, about the absolute isolation and terror I'd felt, filled me with a profound sense of gratitude. I felt happy just to be alive. And for the record, the American League won the All-Star game 13-6,